A stranger approached me, but not for my number. He slid a crisp business card across the table, claiming my husband was sleeping with his fiancée. He told me to meet him at 7 o'clock at the Oak Room for proof. I went, not out of curiosity, but because my husband's shirt smelled like another woman's perfume this morning. That meeting was not an affair. It was the start of the most perfect revenge alliance in Chicago high society history. My name is Morgan. At 34 years old, I had constructed a life that operated with the precision of a Swiss watch as the director of Velvet Horizon Events, the premier event planning firm in Chicago. I was paid to anticipate disasters before they happened. I could spot a wilted peony in a floral arrangement from 50 feet away. I could soothe a bride having a panic attack while simultaneously renegotiating a catering contract. Yet, as I sat in my favorite corner of the coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, scrolling through vendor emails, I failed to see the catastrophe walking straight toward me. A man approached my table. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered expensive tailoring, and moved with a rigid tension that I initially mistook for confidence. He did not smile. He did not ask if the seat was taken. He simply slid a heavy, cream-colored business card across the marble surface until it rested next to my latte. Your husband is sleeping with my fiancée. The world did not stop, but the background noise of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations seemed to drop into a deep, underwater silence. I looked up at him. His eyes were tired, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that sleep could not fix. "Excuse me," I asked, my voice steady, though my fingers had instinctively curled into a fist beneath the table. "His name is Derek," the stranger said, his voice flat and clinical. "Her name is Sienna. They have been at it for 3 months. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to tell me this was some twisted social experiment. But then, the air in my lungs turned to glass. A memory flashed Derek coming home late last Tuesday, smelling faintly of a floral scent that was definitely not my perfume. I had dismissed it as the scent of a department store he had walked through. Then there was the sudden password change on his tablet, the new shirts he had bought without asking my opinion. The stranger tapped the card on the table. "My name is Julian. I am not here to pick you up, Morgan. I am here because we are both the ones being played. We are the punchline to their joke." He checked his watch, a nervous tick that betrayed his calm facade. "If you want proof, meet me at the Oak Room tonight, 7 o'clock. Do not be late." Before I could formulate a question, he turned and walked out the glass doors, disappearing into the Windy City crowd. I was left alone with my cooling coffee and a business card that felt heavy enough to sink a ship. I returned to the Velvet Horizon Events office, but my mind was miles away. My assistant asked me about the centerpiece selection for the Henderson Gala, and I just nodded blindly. I sat at my glass desk and opened the family tracking app on my phone. I scrolled back through the last few weeks. There were gaps. Tuesday night, Thursday evening, Saturday afternoon, times when Derek claimed he was at client meetings, but the GPS showed him at locations that made no sense for business, a boutique hotel downtown, a secluded bistro in Lincoln Park. My phone buzzed on the desk, startling me. The screen lit up with Derek's smiling face. I picked it up. "Hello, hey, honey." Derek's voice came through the speaker, warm and sickeningly familiar. "Listen, I am going to be stuck at the office late tonight. The partners from Stratford Capital are flying in and, well, it is going to be a long dinner. You know how demanding they can be." His lie was so smooth. There was no hesitation, no stutter. It was a practiced performance. "I understand," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Do not work too hard. You are the best. Love you." He hung up. I stared at the phone. I did not cry. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. I left the office early. Driving home to our pristine townhouse in the Gold Coast, I walked into our bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror. I saw a woman who ran a multi-million-dollar company. I saw a woman who kept herself in shape, who dressed impeccably, who supported her husband's climb up the corporate ladder. And I saw a woman who was being made a fool of. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the soft, approachable dresses Derek liked. I reached for a black dress with sharp, architectural lines. It was not a dress for romance. It was a dress for war. It was armor. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun and applied a shade of lipstick that was closer to blood than berry. I arrived at the Oak Room at exactly 7 o'clock. The restaurant was dimly lit, smelling of aged steak and old money. I scanned the room and saw Julian sitting in a high-backed leather booth in the corner. A thick manila folder sat on the table in front of him. I walked over. My heels clicked rhythmically against the hardwood floor, a countdown to the end of my life as I knew it. I reached the booth and stood over him. He looked up, and for a second, I saw the shared pain in his eyes. I sat down opposite him, smoothed my skirt, and locked my gaze with his. "Show me everything." "My profession is risk auditor," Julian stated, his voice devoid of theatricality. "I analyze patterns, detect fraud, and quantify liability. 3 months ago, I noticed a deviation in Sienna's behavior. I applied the same methodology to her that I apply to failing corporations." He flipped open the dossier. It was not a messy pile of papers, but a chronological timeline of betrayal. He pointed to a photograph taken with a telephoto lens. It showed Derek and a petite blonde woman laughing over oysters at a restaurant I recognized immediately. "May 3rd, Julian recited. 7:30 in the evening. You were told he was at a regional sales conference in Detroit." He slid a spreadsheet across the table. "Hotel receipts. He books under the alias David Stone, but he uses the supplementary credit card linked to his corporate expense account. He is sloppy. Morgan. Arrogance makes people sloppy." I looked closer at the photo. My eyes zeroed in on the diamond pendant resting against the woman's throat. It was a delicate teardrop shape, unmistakable in its design. "That necklace," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I circled that in a catalog for him. He told me he bought it for his mother's 60th birthday. His mother never received it. Julian did not offer pity. Instead, he pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. I gained access to the cloud storage linked to Sienna's dash cam. They often disable the GPS, but they forget the interior microphone and camera. He pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from the dashboard looking back into the cabin of Sienna's Mercedes. Derek was driving. His hand was on her thigh. "God, she is exhausting." Derek's voice filled the space between us, tinny but unmistakable. "I come home and it is just schedules and spreadsheets. She is just a workaholic old lady who forgot how to be a wife." Sienna giggled, a sharp, cruel sound. "Don't worry, baby. Once the divorce is finalized, we won't have to deal with her." I watched myself being dissected by the man who had vowed to love me. I felt the blood drain from my face. "There is more," Julian said, pausing for the first time. "Sienna is pregnant. She is 8 weeks along." The air left the room. "And," Julian continued, his finger tracing a line on a legal document in the file, "Derek is not leaving you yet. Not until he secures the asset. He has been consulting with an estate attorney about your father's land in Montana." My hands went cold. Everything suddenly clicked into place. "The power of attorney," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "For 2 weeks, he has been pressuring me to sign over management rights. He said it was for a tax-free investment opportunity." "It is not an investment," Julian corrected. "It is a liquidation. He plans to sell it the moment he has control, stash the cash in an offshore account, and then serve you papers." He flipped to the final page. "Financials. He has drained 40% of your joint savings account." He lists the withdrawals as capital injections for a shell company called Bluebird Consulting. It is not a company. It is the rent for a penthouse on Wacker Drive. He lists it as a representative office. I sat back against the leather booth. I expected tears. I expected the urge to scream or throw the wine glass against the wall. Instead, I felt a terrifying clarity. The heat of my love for Derek evaporated, replaced by a block of ice in my chest. I felt disgust, pure and absolute. I looked at the man across from me. "So," I said, my voice steady, "what do we do confront them?" Julian shook his head slowly. "No, confrontation is for amateurs. It gives them a chance to spin the narrative. We are not going to make a scene. Morgan, we are going to dismantle them. We will destroy their finances, their reputations, and their future. We will leave them with nothing." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "I have the data. I have the evidence. I need a stage." A dark smile touched my lips. I thought of the upcoming week, the biggest event on the social calendar. I have administrative access to the entire run of show for the Stratford Capital Charity Gala next Saturday. I said, "Derek is the keynote speaker. Let's make it our stage." The waiter poured the Cabernet, the liquid swirling dark and heavy in the crystal glasses. We did not smile. This was not a date, and it certainly was not a celebration. It was a war council. Julian raised his glass, catching the dim light of the restaurant. "To mutually assured destruction," he proposed, his voice low and devoid of humor. I clinked my glass against his with a sharp chime. "To scorching the earth." Julian reached into his jacket pocket and slid a cheap, black plastic phone across the white tablecloth. It looked like a relic from 10 years ago, clashing violently with the fine china. "It is a burner," he explained, keeping his hand over it until I took it. "Prepaid. Untraceable. Do not connect it to your home Wi-Fi. Do not turn it on within 1 mile of your house. If Derek is tracking your location, he might have keyloggers on your personal devices. From this moment on, we are ghosts to them." I slipped the phone into my clutch, feeling the weight of the conspiracy settling in. "You seem very prepared for this. Julian, I told you, I analyze risk." He replied, "Now, tell me about the target. We need to know where it hurts him the most." "His ego," I said instantly. "Derek is a textbook narcissist. He does not just want money, he wants adoration. He is currently lobbying for the vice president position at Stratford Capital. He thinks he is God's gift to finance." Julian nodded, processing the data. "And Sienna?" "Her weak point validation," he answered. "She is a micro-influencer. She has about 50,000 followers on social media. Her entire brand is built on ethical living and being a strong, independent woman. If her followers find out she is a homewrecker, living off stolen money, her sponsors will drop her before she can refresh her feed." I leaned forward, a plan crystallizing in my mind. "Then I have the perfect venue for our execution. I am the lead organizer for the Stratford Capital Charity Gala. It is the biggest event of the year. Derek is scheduled to receive the Leadership of the Year award. He expects a coronation in front of the city's elite." Julian's eyes narrowed, a shark smelling blood in the water. A gala. That means donors. That means scrutiny. He tapped the table rhythmically. "If he is using the corporate expense account to fund Sienna's lifestyle, he is not just a cheater. Morgan, he is an embezzler. I will use my access to dig into the Stratford ledgers. I will find every cent he diverted. We will not just ruin his marriage, we will send him to federal prison. I can get you the guest list," I whispered. "I can control the seating chart, the microphones, the video projection, everything." "Good," Julian said. "But here is the hard part. For the next week, you have to be the perfect wife. You have to stroke his ego, fix his tie, smile when he lies to your face. If he suspects even for a second that you know, he will liquidate the assets and run." "I can do it," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought. I have been playing the role of the happy wife for a man who does not see me for years. 1 more week is nothing. "We have a rule," Julian stated firmly. "No one acts alone." Every move must be calculated to inflict maximum damage on the night of the gala. We hold our fire until we can take them both out with a single shot. We finished our drinks in silence. The check came, and Julian paid in cash. We walked out into the cool Chicago night. The wind off the lake was biting, but I hardly felt it. Julian turned to me at the curb. He took my hand, not with romance, but with the grip of a soldier pulling a comrade out of a trench. "Morgan," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "Let him think he has won. Right until the very last second." "I will," I promised. I drove home with my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled into the garage just 10 minutes before I knew Derek usually arrived. I raced upstairs, my hands shaking as I stripped off the black dress and scrubbed the war paint from my lips. I pulled on my silk pajamas and slipped into bed, arranging the covers to look like I had been there for hours. I lay in the dark, forcing my breathing to slow down. 5 minutes later, I heard the heavy front door open. The security system beeped. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, coming closer to the bedroom. The door handle turned. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep, while my heart screamed in my chest like a trapped bird. The man I had vowed to spend my life with walked in, bringing the smell of betrayal into our sanctuary. The mattress dipped under his weight, shifting the air in the room so that the smell hit me before he even touched me. It was a cocktail of expensive scotch and stale cigarette smoke, a clumsy attempt to mask the cloying sweetness of jasmine perfume that certainly did not belong to any of his business partners. Derek leaned over and pressed a kiss to my forehead. His lips were cold. I lay perfectly still, breathing in a shallow rhythm. While my mind replayed the image of him stumbling in, he thought I was asleep. He thought he was safe. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with a cheerfulness that felt like a tight mask stretched over my skull. Sunlight streamed onto the granite countertops, illuminating the perfect domestic scene. Derek walked in, looking haggard, rubbing his temples. "Good morning, darling," I chirped, pouring him a cup of black coffee. "How was the dinner with the Stratford partners? You came in so late." He took the mug, avoiding my eyes. "It was grueling. You know how old man Stratford gets when he starts talking about the market. I could barely keep my eyes open." "Poor thing," I cooed. "Well, I have some good news to cheer you up. I looked over those investment papers for the Montana property. You were right. It makes sense to move the management rights to you for tax purposes." I slid the folder across the island. Inside were documents my private attorney had drafted at 3 a.m, elaborate, official-looking, and completely legally void. Derek picked up the pen. I watched his hand. It did not shake. He signed away his integrity with a flourish. "You are making the right choice." "Morgan," he said, flashing a smile that used to make my knees weak but now just made my stomach turn. "This is for our future. For our future." I echoed. An hour later, I was at my desk at Velvet Horizon Events. I logged into the master control system for the Stratford Gala. The schedule was tight, minute-by-minute perfection, but I had admin privileges. I scrolled to the 8:00 p.m. slot, right before the keynote speech. I deleted the segment titled Corporate History Montage and replaced it with a new file. I named it Special Tribute. My burner phone buzzed in my purse. It was a message from Julian. Got into her cloud. "You need to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a text thread between Sienna and her best friend. In the messages, Sienna complained to her friend, "He is so needy. He actually cried after sex last night talking about his stress." It was pathetic. Her friend replied, "At least the pay is good." Sienna wrote back, "The pay is great, and he is barely 2 minutes of work." I stared at the screen. I did not feel pity for Derek. I felt a grim satisfaction. Later that afternoon, following Julian's tip, I walked into the Gilded Cage, a high-end boutique on Rush Street. I saw her immediately. Sienna was browsing through silk scarves, looking younger and softer than she had in the photos. I took a breath and approached her, fingering a scarf next to hers. That color is stunning on you, I said, projecting the aura of a wealthy, bored socialite. It brings out your eyes. Sienna turned, preening under the compliment. She had no idea who I was. Oh, thank you. I am trying to find something for a gala next week. My boyfriend is, well, he is the guest of honor. Sounds serious. I smiled. It is. She lowered her voice, leaning in conspiratorially. He is extremely successful. He is actually in the middle of a divorce right now. His wife is... she is just this old drag who does not understand him, but he is going to propose to me as soon as the papers are signed. Men like that are worth waiting for, I said, my voice smooth as silk. You are a lucky girl. My phone rang as I left the shop. It was Derek. Hey, where are you? He asked. I called the office and your assistant said you left. I am at the spa. I lied effortlessly. Getting a facial for the gala. I want to look perfect for your big night. I was not at the spa. I was standing in our living room. I knew Derek kept his old iPad in the bottom drawer of the study desk, assuming it was dead. I plugged it in. He had forgotten to log out of his syncing services. I watched the progress bar load, my heart thumping against my ribs. I found a hidden folder labeled New Life. I opened it. It was not just photos. It was a complete set of architectural blueprints for a modern mansion in Lake Geneva. The budget estimate was $2 million. The funding source was listed as M.H. Estate Liquidation. He was building her a dream house with the bones of my father's legacy. When Derek came home that evening, he handed me a small velvet box. I felt bad about being so busy lately, he said. I opened it. Inside was a pair of cubic zirconia stud earrings, the kind you buy at a department store counter as an afterthought. They probably cost less than $100. Oh, Derek, I said, putting them on. I looked at him, and then I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. The earrings caught the light, sparkling with cheap brilliance. They are exactly what I deserve. I smiled at him, a wide, terrifying baring of teeth that he mistook for joy. Thank you, honey. 3 days before the gala, the air around me felt thin, as if the oxygen were being sucked out by the impending storm. I met Julian in the parking lot of a Whole Foods in Lincoln Park. It was mundane, public, and the last place anyone would look for a conspiracy. I parked my Range Rover next to his nondescript sedan. I rolled down my window, and he passed me a silver USB drive. The video is edited, Julian said, his eyes scanning the perimeter. I synced the audio to the transition slides. It is lethal. Just as I reached for it, a voice called out from 2 cars away. Morgan, is that you? My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked up to see Greg, one of the junior partners at Stratford Capital, pushing a cart full of organic vegetables. He was walking straight toward us. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. If he saw Julian, if he recognized the man whose fiancé was sleeping with my husband, everything would collapse. Julian did not flinch. Before Greg could reach the window, Julian produced a clipboard from his passenger seat and leaned out, his voice transforming into a bored, professional drone. So, if you could just sign here regarding the collision waiver, ma'am, we can process the claim for your bumper. I blinked, catching the cue. I turned to Greg with a weary smile. Oh, hi, Greg. Just dealing with insurance. Headaches. Someone tapped my car in the lot. Greg stopped, looking from me to Julian, who was pointing a pen at a generic form. The suspicion in Greg's eyes died instantly. Oh, that sucks, Greg said. See you Saturday, though. Right, Derek is pumped. I wouldn't miss it, I said. Greg walked away. I let out a breath that shook my entire frame. Julian handed me the USB hidden under the clipboard. Close call, he muttered. Go. Now. That evening, Derek came home with a tightness in his jaw that meant he was plotting. He poured himself a drink and leaned against the kitchen island while I chopped vegetables. So, he started. swirling the ice in his glass. I was thinking, for the gala, we need to maximize the PR angle. I invited Sienna to come. You know, as a media consultant to handle the press for the night. I stopped chopping. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted to bring his mistress to his big night, right under my nose, disguised as help. I turned to him, beaming. That is a brilliant idea. Derek, honestly, I was worried about handling the reporters myself. Having a professional there takes such a load off my shoulders. Derek looked relieved, his shoulders dropping an inch. I am glad you think so. I will tell her to stay in the background. Nonsense, I insisted. If she is part of the team, she should be treated like it. I will have a seat arranged for her at the VIP table, right next to us. It is the least I can do. You are amazing. Morgan, he stammered, clearly stunned by his own luck. The next morning, the stakes escalated from marital betrayal to federal crime. Julian contacted me on the burner phone. We have a problem, Julian said, his voice tight. Or maybe it is an opportunity. I was monitoring the transaction queues. Derek has set up a scheduled wire transfer for the night of the gala. He is moving $500,000 from the charity's operating fund to an account in the Cayman Islands. I gripped the phone. 500,000. That is not just skimming. That is grand larceny. Exactly, Julian replied. He is cashing out. He thinks the chaos of the gala will hide the transaction until Monday morning. By then, he plans to be gone. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This was no longer just about a broken heart. I sat down at my laptop and opened a secure browser. I drafted an anonymous email to the board of directors at Stratford Capital. I did not give them details, just a nudge. Review the transaction logs for the charity fund immediately following the event. Irregularities detected in executive approvals. The night before the gala. The silence in our house was deafening. Derek was asleep beside me. The room was dark, but I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Suddenly, Derek shifted. He let out a low, groaning sound. Sienna. He mumbled in his sleep. Don't worry. I turned my head and looked at him. In the shadows, his face looked innocent, almost boyish. I felt for the burner phone under my pillow. My hand closed around it, hard. I was lying next to a criminal, a liar, a man who planned to leave me bankrupt and broken. The phone vibrated against my palm. A text from Julian. Everything is ready. I overrode the sound system and the LED wall protocols. The file is locked in. There is no going back. I typed my reply, my thumb hovering over the send button for a fraction of a second. I felt a surge of adrenaline flood my veins, hot and electric, chasing away the last lingering shadows of pain. Let the show begin. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, designed to make everyone inside feel simultaneously important and insignificant. Overhead, chandeliers the size of small cars refracted light into a million dazzling shards, casting a glow over the hundreds of guests moving like sharks in a tank of expensive perfume. I stood at the top of the grand staircase. I wore red. It was not a subtle burgundy or a polite maroon. It was a violent, screaming scarlet, a dress designed to be the last thing a man saw before he died. I tapped my earpiece, my voice calm and commanding amidst the low hum of the gathering crowd. Lighting cue 3 and 5 minutes, I instructed the control booth, and make sure the audio feed is isolated on the podium. I want crystal clear sound tonight. Copy that. Morgan, the tech director, replied. Then the doors opened, and the guests of honor arrived. Derek walked in, looking devastatingly handsome in a custom tuxedo I had picked out for him 2 months ago. He moved with the easy, rolling gait of a man who believes he owns the world. Beside him, clinging to his arm like a decorative accessory, was Sienna. She was wearing white, a floor-length gown of silk and lace that screamed bridal innocence. It was a grotesque joke, but what caught my eye, what made the bile rise in my throat, was the diamond teardrop pendant resting against her collarbone. The necklace bought with the money meant for his mother, the necklace bought with the money stolen from his company. I glided down the stairs to meet them, my smile fixed in place like a weapon. "You made it," I said, my voice warm. Sienna looked at me, her eyes widening slightly at my dress, but she quickly recovered her composure. "Morgan," she said, her voice high and breathy, "this event is just spectacular." "Thank you," I replied. Stepping closer, I looked directly at the necklace. "And that piece. It is stunning. It really suits your value as a person." Sienna beamed, touching the diamonds, completely missing the insult. "Oh, thank you. Derek has such incredible taste." "He certainly does," I said. Just then, Julian materialized from the crowd. He was dressed in a black tuxedo, looking sharp and dangerous. I had added him to the guest list as a representative of a private equity firm, a potential donor. "Darling," I said to Derek, "have you met Mr. Thorne? He is very interested in the charity's financial transparency." Derek extended his hand, flashing his politician smile. "A pleasure. Always happy to meet someone interested in our cause." "The pleasure is entirely mine," Julian said, taking Derek's hand but not smiling back. "I have heard a lot about your creative accounting methods." Derek laughed, assuming it was a compliment on his fundraising skills. "We do what we can." The dinner chimes rang, and the crowd drifted toward the tables. I watched Derek work the room. He was magnetic. He clapped men on the back, kissed the cheeks of wealthy dowagers, and played the role of the devoted husband and rising star to perfection. He sat at the head table with Sienna placed strategically at his right, just as I had promised. The lights dimmed. The CEO of Stratford Capital, a gray-haired lion of industry named Mr. Sterling, took the stage. Tonight, Mr. Sterling boomed. "We honor a man who represents the future of this company, a man of integrity, a man of family values." I stood in the wings, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains. I watched Derek's face. He looked humble. He looked proud. It was the greatest performance of his life. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sterling announced. Our leader of the year, Derek Vance." Applause thundered through the room. Derek jogged up the steps to the stage, accepted the heavy glass trophy, and stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the sea of admirers. "Thank you," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. I am overwhelmed, but I did not get here alone. I stand here today because of the unwavering support of my beautiful wife, Morgan. She is my rock. She is my everything." He gestured toward where he thought I was sitting. The spotlight swept the room, searching for me. I looked up at the control booth, high above the ballroom floor. I caught the eye of the lead technician, a young man I had personally hired and paid 3 times his usual rate for this specific night. I raised my hand. My phone buzzed in my hand, hidden in the folds of my red dress. I looked down at the screen. It was a text from Julian. "Economic Crimes Unit is in the lobby. It is time. Morgan." I took a deep breath. The adrenaline hit me like a drug, setting my blood on fire. I looked at the tech booth again and slashed my hand through the air. "Cut the feed." Derek gripped the polished edges of the podium, his knuckles white, his face flushed with the intoxication of applause. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to that practiced, earnest register he used to close deals, and none of this success would be possible without the core values that define us, he declared, sweeping his gaze over the captivated audience. Loyalty, integrity, and above all, total transparency. Precisely on the word transparency, the massive LED wall behind him, which had been displaying the Stratford Capital logo in tasteful gold loops, died. It did not fade out. It cut to black with a violence that sucked the light from the stage. A high-pitched screech of audio feedback tore through the room, causing 300 guests to wince and cover their ears. Then, the screen roared back to life, but the logo was gone. In its place, blazing in stark, accusation-red font against a black background, was a new title, Project New Life, The Truth About Operating Costs. A ripple of confused murmurs washed over the ballroom. Derek turned around, blinked at the screen, and then turned back to the crowd with a tight, apologetic smile. He tapped the microphone, assuming it was a harmless prank or a technical glitch. Well, he chuckled, though the sound was brittle. It looks like the tech team is having a bit of fun with the slides tonight, if we could just... The microphone went dead in his hand. He tapped it again. Nothing. He looked toward the sound booth, his eyes widening in panic, but the booth was dark. Suddenly, the video began to play. The audio boomed through the concert-grade speakers I had installed, crisp and terrifyingly loud. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a shaky, handheld video taken inside a hotel suite, on the 500-inch screen. Derek was sitting on a bed covered in stacks of cash. He was laughing, tossing a bundle of bills into the air. Beside him, Sienna was popping a bottle of champagne, her face flushed. To the investors, Derek's voice on the video was slurred and mocking. Those blind old idiots. They actually think you are a genius. Sienna giggled in the clip, leaning in to kiss him. They have no idea we are building our castle with their charity money. The ballroom erupted. It was not applause this time. It was a collective gasp of horror that sounded like the air being sucked out of the room. Derek froze on stage, his hand still raised in a gesture of silence that no one would ever obey again. The video cut away. Now. The screen was flooded with screenshots. They scrolled rapidly but slow enough to be read. Text messages. Filthy, explicit sexting between Derek and Sienna regarding what they would do to each other after the gala. Interspersed with the smut were bank statements. Transfer $50,000 to Bluebird Consulting. Transfer $12,000 to the Gilded Cage Boutique. I watched from the wings. It was a masterpiece of juxtaposition. The vulgarity of their affair was plastered right next to the cold, hard math of their theft. At table 4, Sienna stood up. Her face was a mask of sheer terror, drained of all blood. She looked like a ghost in a wedding dress. She scrambled to turn away, desperate to flee the 1,000 eyes burning into her, but her heel caught in the delicate lace hem of her gown. She crashed to the floor, taking a centerpiece of white roses and crystal wine glasses down with her. The crash of breaking glass punctuated the video's audio. I lifted the microphone in my hand. My voice, cool and amplified, filled the chaotic hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "please forgive the interruption, but this is the most realistic financial report my husband has ever produced." Derek spun toward the sound of my voice. I stepped out from the heavy velvet curtains. The spotlight hit me, igniting the red fabric of my dress. I did not look at the crowd. I looked only at him. He stood there, pale and trembling, stripped of his armor. "Morgan," he mouthed, the word dying in the air without a microphone. "Morgan, please." Julian stood up from his seat near the front. He looked calm, almost bored amidst the bedlam. He raised a hand and pointed a finger directly at Sienna, who was sobbing on the floor, trying to cover her face with her ruined dress. "And that," Julian announced, his voice projecting clearly over the din, "is my fiancé. And that necklace she is wearing, it is worth $50,000. And every cent of it came from your donations. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Stratford Capital, stood up. His face was a terrifying shade of purple. He looked at the screen. where a screenshot of Derek mocking Sterling's toupee was currently displayed. With a roar of pure fury, Sterling hurled his champagne flute at the floor, shattering it into dust. "Security," Sterling bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. "Lock the doors. No one leaves this room. Call the police. Call them now." The doors of the ballroom did not just open, they were breached. A dozen agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and Federal Economic Crimes Unit poured into the gilded hall, their presence shattering the last illusion of high society decorum. The screams of the guests were quickly drowned out by the shout of orders. The room became a kaleidoscope of panic, with billionaires scrambling over velvet chairs to distance themselves from the stage. Derek was still clinging to the podium, looking like a captain whose ship had suddenly evaporated beneath his feet. He saw the agents rushing toward him, and his face contorted into a mask of desperate denial. He pointed a shaking finger at the blank screen behind him. This is a mistake," Derek shouted, his voice cracking. It is AI. It is a deep fake video I am being framed by competitors." The lead agent did not pause to debate technology. He spun Derek around, slamming his chest against the polished wood of the podium. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the room, louder than any applause Derek had received that night. "Derek Vance," the agent recited, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." At the back of the room, Sienna tried to slip through the chaos. She had kicked off her heels and was sprinting toward the service exit, her white dress bunched up in her hands. She made it 3 steps before 2 uniformed officers blocked her path. "No!" she shrieked, flailing as they grabbed her arms. "I did not do anything. He made me do it. Derek. He told me it was legal. I am just a victim here." Julian stepped out from the crowd, calm as the eye of a hurricane. He walked up to the officers holding Sienna and held out his phone. "Officers," Julian said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "I think you will want to hear this. It is a recording from 2 months ago where she discusses how to structure the shell companies to avoid detection. She was not coerced. She was the architect." Sienna stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. "Julian, baby, please." I was confused. The flashbulbs began to pop. I had tipped off the city's most aggressive photojournalists an hour ago, promising them the scandal of the decade. They were there now, lined up against the barricades, capturing every second of Derek's humiliation. The white light strobed relentlessly, blinding him, immortalizing his fall in high definition. I stood alone at the center of the stage, untouched by the swarm of agents. I watched the madness unfold with the detachment of a director watching a play reach its finale. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "I apologize for the interruption to your evening. Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and cool. "But I have always believed that the truth is significantly more important than dessert." Below me, the floor was a riot. Investors had surrounded Mr. Sterling, shouting demands for explanations, their faces red with the realization that their charitable donations had funded a mistress's wardrobe. Derek was being hauled down the stairs of the stage. His tuxedo was disheveled, his tie undone. As the agents dragged him past me, he dug his heels into the carpet, fighting to look me in the eye. "You," he hissed, saliva flying from his lips. "You crazy witch! You have ruined me. You destroyed my life." I looked down at him. I did not frown. I did not shout. I simply smiled, a small, serene expression that I knew would haunt him in his cell. "No, Derek," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear over the din. "You did that all by yourself." The agents shoved him forward, dragging him out the double doors into the waiting night. Across the room, Julian approached Sienna. She was cuffed now, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. He reached out and took her left hand. She stopped crying for a second, looking at him with a glimmer of pathetic hope. "Julian," she whimpered. He didn't speak. He simply slid the diamond engagement ring off her finger. He held it up to the light, inspecting it for a moment, and then slipped it into his pocket. "This ring represents a promise," Julian said softly. "And you do not deserve promises anymore." The police led her away. As the doors closed behind the criminals, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The shock began to fade, replaced by a murmur of awe. The guests looked up at me on the stage. I was no longer the pitied wife. I was the woman who had burned the corruption out of their circle. A woman in the front row began to clap. Then another. Soon, a ripple of applause moved through the shell-shocked crowd, not for Derek, but for the justice I had served. I looked across the sea of heads and found Julian. He was standing near the exit, adjusting his cufflinks. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. We did not smile. We did not wave. We just knew. The performance was over, and the reviews were going to be spectacular. 1 week after the gala, the silence in the office of my divorce attorney was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The mahogany desk between us was covered in documents, but there was no negotiation taking place. It was a surrender. My lawyer, a shark of a man named Mr. Henderson, tapped the final decree with his pen. "It is a clean sweep, Morgan," Mr. Henderson said, a rare smile touching his lips. Given the irrefutable evidence of infidelity, combined with the federal freezing of his assets due to the criminal investigation, Derek has agreed to your terms. You get the house, you get the full investment portfolio, and you get a significant settlement for emotional distress. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. "And the contestation period waived," he replied. "He is too busy trying to stay out of a maximum security facility to fight you over furniture. The criminal charges against Derek were extensive. The district attorney was throwing the book at him embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud a charitable organization. He was facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison. His career at Stratford Capital was not just over, it was radioactive. As for Sienna, her fall was less legal but equally brutal. The recording Julian had provided saved her from a long prison sentence, but she was facing a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. However, her true punishment was digital. The internet had no mercy. She lost every brand deal she had. Her comment sections were a war zone of mockery and disgust. She had built her life on the validation of strangers, and now those strangers were tearing her apart. 2 days later, I listed the townhouse on the Gold Coast. The real estate agent told me I could get a premium price for it. I did not care about the margin. I just wanted it gone. I took the proceeds from the sale, every single cent, and deposited them into the business account of Velvet Horizon Events. I was not just going to survive, I was going to expand. On Friday afternoon, Julian came to see me at my new temporary office. He did not bring flowers. He brought a bottle of sparkling water and 2 takeout boxes from a Thai place we both liked. We sat on the floor, surrounded by moving boxes. There was no romantic tension between us, no lingering touches. We had walked through fire together, but we had come out as comrades, not lovers. "How is the single life?" Julian asked, opening a container of pad thai. "Quiet," I said, taking a bite. "Peaceful." "And you? How is the recovery?" "Sienna tried to call me yesterday," he said, his voice void of emotion. She wanted to explain. She said she was confused. "What did you do?" "I changed my number." He replied simply. "We make a good team. Morgan. But I think we are done with drama for a lifetime." "Agreed," I said, raising my water bottle. To silence. To silence. My phone rang later that evening. I recognized the number immediately. It was Derek's mother. For years. She had criticized my cooking, my career, and my inability to give her a grandchild. Now she was calling me. I answered, putting the phone on speaker. Morgan. Her voice was shrill and panicked. Morgan, please, you have to stop this. You have to talk to the judge. He is your husband. He made a mistake, but you cannot let them put him in a cage. We are family. I listened to her beg. I listened to the desperation of a woman who had raised a narcissist and was now terrified of the monster she had created. He is not my husband, I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the signal. And he is not my problem anymore. Do not call this number again. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. I blocked his father. I blocked his sister. It felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb. The media requests were piling up in my inbox. Good morning. America wanted an exclusive. Vanity Fair wanted a cover story on the revenge wife. I declined them all. I deleted every email. I did not want to be famous for being a victim. I wanted to be known for my work, for my talent, not for the wreckage of my marriage. The final step came on Monday morning. I stood at the clerk's office at City Hall. The paperwork was simple, but the weight of it was immense. I signed the line that restored my identity. I was no longer Morgan Vance. I stripped his name off me like a dirty coat that I had worn for too long. I walked back to my car and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked different. The lines of worry around my eyes had softened. The tension in my jaw was gone. I had walked through hell. I had looked the devil in the face and laughed. Hello? Morgan, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. It is good to have you back. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the past in the dust, completely unburnt. 3 months had passed since the night the lights went out at the Ritz-Carlton. The seasons had changed, and so had the landscape of my life. I stood in the center of the expansive, loft-style space that served as the new headquarters for Velvet Horizon events. The walls were brick, the ceilings were high, and the air smelled of fresh lilies and expensive champagne. This was not an event for a client. This was for me. It was a declaration that I had not only survived the fire, but had built a castle from the ashes. The room was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I saw Julian enter near the front entrance. He looked different. The haunted, exhausted look was gone, replaced by a lightness I had never seen in him. He was holding the hand of a woman with warm eyes and a soft smile, someone who looked kind rather than expensive. They walked over to me. Morgan, Julian said, his voice warm. You did it. This place is incredible. We did it. I corrected him gently. I looked at the woman beside him. I am so happy you came. This is Elena, Julian said, squeezing her hand. She knows the whole story, and she still agreed to have dinner with me. He is a good man, Elena said, smiling at him. He just needed a fresh start. We both did. I said. I watched them walk away toward the bar, and a genuine smile touched my lips. I did not feel a pang of jealousy or longing. I felt peace. Julian and I were bound by a secret history, but our futures lay on different paths, and that was exactly how it should be. As I circulated through the room, my gaze landed on a corner near the balcony doors. One of my new junior event coordinators, a 22-year-old girl named Maya, was being cornered by a man in a sharp suit. He was older, handsome in a slick way, and he was leaning in too close. I saw the discomfort in Maya's posture, the way she clutched her drink like a shield. I moved closer, my hearing tuning out the music to catch his words. You know, the man was saying, his voice dropping to that familiar, predatory purr. You have such an old soul for someone so young. I feel like I could really help your career. Maybe we could discuss it over dinner next week. The script was so tired it was almost tragic. I stepped in immediately. I did not throw a drink. I did not make a scene. I simply placed my hand firmly on Maya's shoulder, breaking the invisible cage he had built around her. Maya, I said, my voice crisp and authoritative. "I need you to check the lighting levels in the VIP lounge immediately." Maya looked at me, relief flooding her face. "Yes." Morgan. "Right away." She scurried off. The man straightened up, flashing me an annoyed look. "I was just having a conversation," he said defensively. "I know exactly what you were doing," I replied, my voice low and dangerous. "This is my company. And in my house. We do not play those games. Enjoy the appetizers, and then leave." He blinked, stunned by the steel in my tone, and retreated into the crowd. I watched him go, realizing that my victory was not just about destroying Derek. It was about creating a fortress where women like Maya and women like the old me were safe from men who viewed them as prey. I needed air. I stepped out onto the balcony. The Chicago wind was cold, whipping my hair across my face, but it felt cleansing. The city lights spread out before me, a grid of gold and amber against the darkness. My mind drifted back to that morning in the coffee shop. I thought about the moment Julian placed that card on the table. I thought about the fear I had felt, the urge to run away and pretend everything was fine. I said yes. I whispered to the empty air. I realized then that I had not just said yes to a revenge plot. I had not just said yes to meeting a stranger. I had said yes to myself. I had said yes to the truth, no matter how much it hurt. That single syllable had been the key that unlocked the cage I had been living in for years. I raised my glass of wine toward the skyline, toward the millions of people living their lives in the glowing windows below. "To Morgan," I said softly. "To the woman who refused to be a victim." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted rich and complex, like life itself. I turned my back on the cold railing. Through the glass doors, I could see the party in full swing. My employees were laughing, the music was swelling, and the future was wide open. It was a future unwritten, a script that belonged entirely to me. There were no more lies. There were no more shadows. I opened the door and stepped back into the light. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so that this story can be heard by even more people. Your support means the world to us.